Level number 1, position. It's a great place to visit, but you wouldn't want to live there. Leadership traditionally begins with position. Someone joins the Army, and he or she becomes a recruit working to earn the rank of private. A person gets a job, and along with it usually comes a title or a job description. Laborer, salesperson, waiter, clerk, accountant, manager. Position is the starting place for every level of leadership. It is the bottom floor and the foundation upon which leadership must be built. Real influence must be developed upon that foundation. There was a time when people relied heavily on position to lead, which is no surprise when you consider that at one time hereditary leadership positions were handed down from father to son and sometimes daughter within families. Princes became kings and their decisions were law, for good or bad. In most industrialized nations, those days are gone. True, there are still nations with kings and queens, but even in most of those nations, such as England, monarchs rule with the permission of the people, and the real leaders are usually elected. Position gives you a chance, but it usually carries with it very little real power, except in systems where the penalties for not following are dire. There's nothing wrong with having a position of leadership. When a person receives a leadership position, it's usually because someone in authority saw talent and potential in that person. And with that title and position comes some rights and a degree of authority to lead others. Position is a good starting place. And like every level of leadership, it has an upside and a downside. Let's start by looking at the good things about the position level of leadership. The upside of position. You have been invited to the leadership table. Just as there are positive and negative aspects in every season of life, there are both positive and negative aspects to every level of leadership. If you're new to leadership and you receive a position, then there are things to celebrate. I'm going to tell you about 4 of them. 1. A leadership position is usually given to people because they have leadership potential. Most of the time when people enter a leadership position, they do so because it was granted or appointed by some other person in authority. That probably seems obvious. But think about the implications. It usually means that the person in authority believes the new leader has some degree of potential for leading. That's the good news. So if you're new to leadership and you have been invited to lead something, then celebrate the fact that someone in authority believes in you. I remember the first time I was given a leadership position. I was named by my high school basketball coach to be captain of our team. What an exhilarating moment that was. When I close my eyes, I can still remember how it felt to know that Coach Neff had confidence in me. After he made the announcement, he shared with the other players that I was an example of positive attitude and hard work. But later he took me aside and explained that the title of captain would merely give me a platform to display my leadership abilities. It did not guarantee that the players would follow me. He said earning that would be my responsibility. The best leaders promote people into leadership based on leadership potential, not on politics, seniority, credentials, or convenience. John Wooden, the legendary UCLA basketball coach, who was a fantastic leader, once told me that he didn't designate a captain for his team until after a few games into the season. He waited because he wanted to see which player would step up and deserve the honor. He has often been quoted as saying to his team, "Don't tell me what you're going to do, show me what you're going to do." If you have a new leadership position, then let me say, welcome to the first step in your leadership journey. You have a seat at the table and have been invited to be part of the leadership game. You will have opportunities to express your opinion and make decisions. Your initial goal should be to show your leader and your team that you deserve the position you have received. Number 2. A leadership position means authority is recognized. When an individual receives a position and title, some level of authority or power usually comes with them. Often in the beginning, that power is very limited, but that's okay because most leaders need to prove themselves with little before being given much. Going back to my first official leadership position, captain on the basketball team, I received certain new privileges. Before tip-off, I got to meet at the center court with the referees and the other team's captain to discuss the game to be played. I could call timeout during the game, and was asked for input from the coach when we were in the huddle. I also spoke to the team in the locker room before and after each game. My title gave me recognition and authority. However, I also recognized the limitations of that recognition and authority. As the infantryman's journal says, no man is a leader until his appointment is ratified in the minds and the hearts of his men. As a new leader, you must use the authority you are given wisely to advance the team and help the people you lead. Do that, and your people will begin to give you even greater authority. When that happens, you gain leadership, not just a position. Number 3, a leadership position is an invitation to grow as a leader. There should always be a relationship between receiving a leadership position and fulfilling the requirements demanded by it. One of the main requirements is personal growth. I learned this early in my life from my father, who loved to quote, "To whoever much is given, much shall be required." He believed that each of us had received a lot in life, and we had a responsibility to learn and grow so that we could make the most of it. The journey through the 5 levels of leadership will only be successful if you dedicate yourself to continual development. If you believe that the position makes the leader, you will have a hard time becoming a good leader. You will be tempted to stop and graze, meaning you'll stay where you are and enjoy the position's benefits, instead of striving to grow and become the best leader you can. Frequently, I'll ask a group, what's the one thing you would change to improve the effectiveness of your organization? Usually people name things that can be found on the list of P's: products, promotions, policies, processes, procedures, pricing, and people. Seldom does anyone say the most important and impacting of all answers: me. I would change me to improve our organization. Yet that seldom heard response is the key to success. If you want to lead, you need to grow. The only way to improve an organization is to grow and improve the leaders. If you want to make an impact, start with yourself. The leaders who do the greatest harm to an organization are the ones who think that they have arrived. Once they receive the title or position they desire, they stop growing. They stop innovating. They stop improving. They rest on their entitlements and clog up everything. Make the most of this opportunity in leadership by making growth your goal, and strive to keep growing. Good leaders are always good learners. To be an effective leader, you must believe that the leadership position you receive is merely an invitation to grow. If you do that and become a lifetime learner, you will continually increase your influence over time, and you will make the most of your leadership potential, no matter how great or small it might be. Number 4, a leadership position allows potential leaders to shape and define their leadership. The greatest upside potential for people invited to take a leadership position is that it affords them the opportunity to decide what kind of a leader they want to be. The position they receive may be defined, but they are not. When you become a leader, your leadership page is blank, and you get to fill it in any way you want. What kind of leader do you want to be? Don't just become reactive and develop a style by default. Really think about it. Do you want to be a tyrant or a team builder? Do you want to come down on people or lift them up? Do you want to give orders or ask questions? You can develop whatever style you want as long as it is consistent with who you are. Francis Hesselbein, founding president and chairman of the board of governors of the Leader to Leader Institute, observed, "Leadership is much less about what you do and much more about who you are." If you view leadership as a bag of manipulative tricks or charismatic behaviors to advance your own personal interests, then people have every right to be cynical. But if your leadership flows first and foremost from inner character and integrity of ambition, then you can justly ask people to lend themselves to your organization and its mission. If you're new to leadership or new to a particular leadership position, it is the perfect time to think about the leadership style you desire to develop. If you are an experienced leader, you can, of course, reevaluate the way you lead and make changes. However, you will be working against your people's past experiences and have to overcome their expectations. As you move forward, what should you consider? 3 things. Who am I? Good leadership begins with leaders knowing who they are. In his book, It's Your Ship, Captain Mike Abrashoff states, "In a nutshell, hard experience has taught me that real leadership is about understanding yourself first, then using that to create a superb organization. Leaders must free their subordinates to fulfill their talents to the utmost. However, most obstacles that limit people's potential are set in motion by the leader and are rooted in his or her own fears, ego needs, and unproductive habits. When leaders explore deep within their thoughts and feelings in order to understand themselves, a transformation can take shape. Successful leaders work hard to know themselves. They know their own strengths and weaknesses. They understand their temperament. They know what personal experience serves them well. They know their work habits, their daily, monthly, and seasonal rhythms. They know which kinds of people they work well with and which kinds they have to try harder with to appreciate. They have a sense of where they are going and how they want to get there. As a result, they know what they're capable of doing, and their leadership is steady. Knowing yourself on a pretty deep level isn't quick or easy. It is a long and involved process. Some of it isn't particularly fun, but it is necessary if you want to become a better leader. Self-knowledge is foundational to effective leading. What are my values? In a speech on the value of honesty, Mark Twain once told this story. When I was a boy, I was walking along a street and happened to spy a cart full of watermelons. I was fond of watermelon, so I sneaked quietly on the cart and snitched one. Then I ran into a nearby alley and sank my teeth into the melon. No sooner had I done so, however, than a strange feeling came over me. Without a moment's hesitation, I made a decision. I walked back to the cart, replaced the melon, and took a ripe one. With all the problems we've witnessed in the banking industry, the implosion of Enron, and the failures of political leaders, I believe we understand what can happen when people treat their values like watermelons on the back of a cart, trading one for another. When leaders don't have and maintain strong core values, their actions impact many more people than just themselves. Your values are the soul of your leadership, and they drive your behavior. Before you can grow and mature as a leader, you must have a clear understanding of your values and commit to living consistently with them, since they will shape your behavior and influence the way you lead. As you reflect on your values, I believe you should settle what you believe in 3 key areas. Ethical values. What does it mean to do the right thing for the right reason? Relational values. How do you build an environment of trust and respect with others? Success values. What goals are worth spending your life on? If you answer these questions and commit yourself to living your values in these 3 areas, you'll be well on your way to developing the integrity that makes you attractive to team members and makes them want to follow your leadership. Not long ago, I came across a survey that confirms this. American workers were asked to select the one trait that was the most important to them in a leader. While important to some, the majority of responders didn't identify expertise, competence, or even fairness as the most important. Here are the results of the survey. Number 1 in ranking, leading by example, 26%. Number 2 in ranking, strong ethics or morals, 19%. Number 3 in ranking, knowledge of business, 17%. Number 4 in ranking, fairness, 14%. Number 5 in ranking, overall intelligence and competence, 13%. Number 6 in ranking, recognition of employees, 10%. Clearly, if leaders have a strong set of ethical values and live them out, then people will respect them, not just their position. Immature leaders try to use their position to drive high performance. Mature leaders with self-knowledge realize that consistently high performance from their people isn't prompted by position, power, or rules. It is encouraged by values that are real and genuine. What leadership practices do I want to put into place? Herb Kelleher, the former chairman and CEO of Southwest Airlines, began his career as an attorney. In those early years, he learned some important lessons about leadership. He says, "My best lesson on leadership came during my early days as a trial lawyer. Wanting to learn from the best, I went to see two of the most renowned litigators in San Antonio try cases. One sat there and never objected to anything, but was very gentle with the witnesses and established a rapport with the jury. The other was an aggressive, thundering hellraiser, and both seemed to win every case. That's when I realized there are many different paths, not one right path. That's true of leadership as well. People with different personalities, different approaches, different values succeed not because one set of values or practices is superior, but because their values and practices are genuine. If you want to become a better leader, you must not only know yourself and define your values, you must also live them out. As you think about the way you will define your leadership, take into consideration what kinds of habits and systems you will consistently practice. What will you do to organize yourself? What will you do every day when you arrive at work? What spiritual practices will you maintain to keep yourself on track? How will you treat people? What will be your work ethic? What kind of example will you set? Everything is up for grabs. It's up to you to define it. And the earlier you are on the leadership journey, the greater the potential for gain if you start developing good habits now. The bottom line is that an invitation to lead people is an invitation to make a difference. Good leadership changes individual lives. It forms teams. It builds organizations. It impacts communities. It has the potential to impact the world. But never forget that position is only the starting point. The downside of position. True leadership isn't about position. Like everything else in life, the position level of leadership has negatives as well as positives. Each of the levels of leadership possesses downsides as well as upsides. You will find as you move up the levels that the upsides increase and the downsides decrease. Since position is the lowest level of leadership, it has a great number of negatives. On level 1, I see 8 major downsides. Number 1, having a leadership position is often misleading. The easiest way to define leadership is by position. Once you have a position or title, people will identify you with it. However, positions and titles are very misleading. A position always promises more than it can deliver. I learned this lesson about level 1 when I received my first leadership position in my first church. I mistakenly thought that being named the pastor meant that I was the leader. I couldn't have been more mistaken, as I found out in my first board meeting. Soon after I officially started the meeting as the designated leader, the real leader took over. His name was Claude. He had lived in the rural valley where the church was located all his life, and everybody loved him. His influence was obvious as the other members of the board looked to him for direction and asked him questions regarding every issue. I could have left the meeting and no one would have cared. In fact, I could have left the meeting and no one would have noticed. I was shocked. In the first meeting and all the subsequent ones, all eyes and attention were focused on Claude, the real leader. The board members were not following me, even though I had the job title, the calling, the appropriate college degree, the office, the salary, all of the positional stuff. Claude had none of those things, and yet they listened to everything he said. My mistake was thinking that I had become a leader because of my position instead of recognizing it as an opportunity to become a leader. I didn't understand that leadership was given to me but not yet earned by me. Back then I defined leading as a noun, as who I was, not a verb, as what I was doing. Leadership is action, not position. When I arrived at that first church, Claude had been earning his leadership influence through many positive actions over many years, and people followed him as a result. Claude, who was a down-to-earth farmer, explained it to me later, saying, "John, all the letters before or after a name are like the tail on a pig. It has nothing to do with the quality of the bacon." I have come to embrace leadership as action, and I endeavor to teach that concept to leaders in conferences and seminars at home and abroad. One of the ways I do that is through my international nonprofit leadership organization, EQUIP, which has trained more than 5 million leaders in 160 countries. The organization's trainers and I have found that The number one challenge in developing countries is introducing the idea of leadership as action instead of position. Leaders in these countries often possess an "I've arrived" mindset. We want them to understand one of the most important characteristics of leadership. Leaders are always taking people somewhere. They aren't static. If there is no journey, there is no leadership. Leaders who rely on position to lead often devalue people. People who rely on position for their leadership almost always place a very high value on holding on to their position, often above everything else that they do. Their position is more important to them than the work they do, the value they add to their subordinates, or their contribution to the organization. This kind of attitude does nothing to promote good relationships with people. In fact, positional leaders often see subordinates as an annoyance and interchangeable cogs in the organizational machine, or even as troublesome obstacles to their goal of getting a promotion to their next position. As a result, departments, teams, or organizations that have positional leaders suffer terrible morale. Often to make themselves look better or to keep people from rising up and threatening them, positional leaders make other people feel small. How? By not having a genuine belief in them, by assuming people can't instead of assuming they can, by assuming people won't rather than believing they will, by seeing their problems more readily than their potential, by viewing them as liabilities instead of assets. Leaders who rely on their title or position to influence others just do not seem to work well with people. Some don't even like people. Why? It's a chicken or egg question, really. Do they not work well with people, and as a result they rely on position? Or is it that because they rely on their position, they never take time and effort to work well with people? I don't know. Maybe both kinds of positional leaders exist. But here's what I do know. They neglect many of the human aspects of leading others. They ignore the fact that all people have hopes, dreams, desires, and goals of their own. They don't recognize that as leaders they must bring together their vision and their aspirations of their people in a way that benefits everyone. In short, they do not lead well because they fail to acknowledge and take into account that leadership, of any kind, in any location, for any purpose, is about working with people. Number 3, positional leaders feed on politics. When leaders value position over the ability to influence others, the environment of the organization usually becomes very political. There is a lot of maneuvering. Positional leaders focus on control instead of contribution. They work to gain titles. They do what they can to get the largest staff and the biggest budget they can, not for the sake of the organization's mission, but for the sake of expanding and defending their turf. And when a positional leader is able to do this, it often incites others to do the same because they worry that others' gains will be their loss. Not only does it create a vicious cycle of gamesmanship, posturing, and maneuvering, but it also creates departmental rivalries and silos. For a very short time as a young leader, I worked in a highly political environment like the one I described. It was like working in a minefield. There were many unwritten rules and hidden protocols for setting up appointments with superiors or selecting who you ate with at lunch. There was great emphasis placed on using proper titles to address people, and much of how you were treated depended on your background. Needless to say, I did not do well in that environment. I immediately looked for a better place to develop my leadership skills. When I found it and left, I was so happy, and so were they. I have yet to find a highly political organization that runs at top efficiency and possesses high morale. Just look at most of our government institutions and think about the leaders and workers in them. Most people could certainly use improvement, and moving away from positional leadership would do a lot to help them. Number 4, positional leaders place rights over responsibilities. One of my all-time favorite TV characters is Barney Fife, the deputy in the little town of Mayberry on the Andy Griffith Show. Don Knotts played Barney, and along with Andy Griffith, who played Sheriff Andy Taylor, he gave America one of its most successful TV series. I have watched every episode, some many times. Barney Fife was your typical positional leader. His desire to feel important and have authority created many humorous storylines. Armed with one bullet and a badge, he took every opportunity to let people know that he was in charge. He had rights as a lawman, and he wanted people to acknowledge them. Unfortunately for him, but fortunately for us in the audience, no one else took him seriously. The result was comic chaos, which seemed to follow him everywhere he went. In contrast, Sheriff Andy, who seemed to spend all of his time being a calming influence on his misguided deputy, had the real authority and power, but he rarely used his position to get things done. He didn't carry a gun either. Everyone knew he was the real leader and could handle any situation. Andy's focus was on his responsibility to the people that he served, not on demanding respect or receiving the rights due to him because of his position. The Andy Griffith Show was light-hearted fun, but it also was a study in leadership. Poet T.S. Eliot asserted, "Half of the harm that is done in this world is due to people who want to feel important. They don't mean to do harm. They are absorbed in the endless struggle to think well of themselves." That's what positional leaders do. They do things to make themselves look and feel important. Inevitably, positional leaders who rely on their rights develop a sense of entitlement. They expect their people to serve them rather than looking for ways to serve their people. Their job description is more important to them than job development. They value territory over teamwork. As a result, they usually emphasize rules and regulations that are to their advantage, and they ignore relationships. This does nothing to promote teamwork and create a positive working environment. Just because you have the right to do something as a leader doesn't mean that it's the right thing to do. Changing your focus from rights to responsibilities is often a sign of maturity in a leader. Many of us were excited in early leadership years by the authority we had and what we could do with it. That power can be exhilarating, if not downright intoxicating. It's the reason President Abraham Lincoln said, "Nearly all men can stand adversity, but if you want to test a man's character, give him power." Each of us as leaders must strive to grow up and grow into a leadership role without relying on our rights. If we can mature in that way, we will start to change our focus from enjoying authority for its own sake to using authority to serve others. Number 5. Positional leadership is often lonely. The phrase, "it's lonely at the top," must have been uttered by a positional leader. Either that or by someone with a personality disorder. Leadership doesn't have to be lonely. People make it that way. Positional leaders can become lonely if they misunderstand the functions and purpose of leadership. Being a good leader doesn't mean trying to be king of the hill and standing above or set apart from others. Good leadership is about walking beside people and helping them climb up the hill with you. If you're atop the hill alone, you may get lonely. If you have others alongside you, it's hard to be that way. King of the hill leaders create a negative work environment because they are insecure and easily threatened. Whenever they see people with potential starting to climb, it worries them. They fear that their place on top is being threatened. As a result, they undermine the people who show talent, trying to guard their position and keep themselves clearly above and ahead of anyone else. What is the usual result? The best people, feeling undermined and put down, leave the department or organization and look for another hill to climb. Only average or unmotivated people stay, and they know their place is at the bottom. That develops an us versus them culture, with the positional leader standing alone on top. Leadership doesn't have to be lonely. People who feel lonely have created a situation that makes them feel that way. Number 6. Leaders who remain positional get branded and stranded. As I began to lead people early in my career, I learned a valuable lesson. I always tried to set up new leaders for success, and I often gave them everything I could to help them become established leaders. A leadership position, my time, my influence, modeling, resources, leadership opportunities. And here's what I found. If I gave the good potential leaders little or nothing, they still succeeded and became good leaders. In contrast, when I gave mediocre leaders everything I had, they still didn't succeed and couldn't establish themselves as good leaders. The position does not make the leader makes the position. Whenever people use their position to lead others for a long time and fail to develop genuine influence, they become branded as positional leaders, and they rarely get further opportunities for advancement in that organization. They may move laterally, but they rarely move up. If you have been a positional leader, you can change that, and this audio book will help you. However, you need to recognize that the longer you have relied on your position, the more difficult it will be for you to change others' perception about your leadership style. You may even need to change positions in order to restart the process of developing influence with others. Number 7. Turnover is high for positional leaders. When people rely on their positions for leadership, the result is almost always high turnover. One of the chapters in my book, Leadership Gold, is titled, People Quit People, Not Companies. In it, I explain how people often take a job because they want to be a part of a particular company, but when they quit, it is almost always because they want to get away from particular people. Good leaders leave an organization when they have to follow bad leaders. Good workers leave an organization when the work environment is poor. Interview a person who has left, and the odds are high that they did not leave their job. They left the people they had to work with. Every company has turnover. It is inevitable. The question every leader must ask is, who is leaving? Are the 8s, 9s, and 10s leaving, or the 1s, 2s, and 3s? If 8s are leaving and 3s are coming in, there's trouble ahead. Organizations with level 1 leadership tend to lose their best people and attract average or below average people. The more level 1 leaders an organization has, the more the door swings out with high-level people and in with low-level ones. About a year ago, my friend Linda Sasser wrote me a note in which she talked about the dynamics that occur when higher-level employees find themselves working for a positional leader. She says that these people often become lost leaders. Here's what Linda wrote. It seems that a level 1 leader also finds it difficult to have level 3 employees. Good mid-level leaders make incompetent leaders uncomfortable. So while it is true that employees will leave a weak level 1 leader, it is also true that level 1 leaders will remove level 3 followers. Seeing this happen before my eyes has fascinated me and, of course, saddened me. So why do I call them lost leaders? They are great up-and-comers who have been called to lead because of talent, yet are suppressed or driven away by level 1 bosses, therefore leaving them unemployed and lost amongst all the displaced workers. What a waste of time and talent. Every time a productive worker or potential leader is driven away by a positional leader, the organization suffers. It's a fact that an organization will not function on a level higher than its leader. It just doesn't happen. If a level 1 leader is in charge, the organization will eventually be a level 1 organization. If the leader is on level 4, the organization will never get to level 5 unless the leader grows to that level. Number 8, positional leaders receive people's least, not their best. Can you name one organization that gets the least from its people and is the best at what it does? Can you name one coach who gets the least from team members and has won a championship? Can you name one teacher who gets the least from students yet ranks highest among peers? Can you name one country that gets the least from its citizens and is respected by the world? Can you name one marriage that gets the least from each spouse yet yields a great long-term relationship? No. But you can't. Why? Because it's impossible to be successful with people who give the least. People who rely on their positions and titles are the weakest of all leaders. They give their least. They expect their position to do the hard work for them in leadership. As a result, their people also give their least. Some people who work for a positional leader may start out strong, ambitious, innovative, and motivated, but they rarely stay that way. Typically, they become one of 3 types of people. 1. Clock watchers. Followers who thrive in level 1 leadership environments love clocks, and they want them visible at all times throughout the building. Why? Because every moment at work is evaluated according to the clock. Before noon, whenever they look at the time, they think in terms of how long they've been there. I've been here 2 hours. After lunch, it's how much time they have left. Only 2 more hours until I go home. The clock also makes them aware of the more important times of the day, break time and lunchtime. In Level 1 leadership environments, the morale of the employees begins to pick up after the afternoon break because it begins the countdown to the highlight of their day, quitting time. Around 4:30, the energy in the place really begins to increase. People are moving about the office, putting things away. They clear their desks so that nothing can hinder them from leaving work at exactly 5 p.m. At 4:45, they are walking around visiting and saying their goodbyes to fellow employees. After all, they wouldn't want to seem rude by not saying goodbye when they go flying out of the door. At 4:50, they go to the restroom one last time, no matter how much of their day they may have spent there. They wouldn't want to waste valuable personal time in the bathroom when they can do it on company time. At 4:55, they replace their work shoes for track shoes. This ensures a quick getaway. At 4:58, they get into starting position and wait for the clock to sound. At 5 p.m., everyone is gone. Their exits have been coordinated, practiced, and timed to perfection. At 5:02, not a single car is left in the parking lot, each one having been carefully backed into place that morning, ready for a quick escape. Okay, so maybe I'm exaggerating just a bit, but that description is not that far from the truth. Clock watchers always know how much time is left before they get to go home, and they never want to work a moment beyond quitting time. But think about it. When people who work with you can hardly wait to quit working with you, something is not working. Number 2, just enough employees. Because positional leaders at Level 1 rely on their rights to lead and use their leadership position as leverage, the people who work for them often rely on their rights as employees and use the limits of their job descriptions as leverage to do only what's required of them. If they do that often and long enough, they become just enough people. They do just enough to get by, to get paid, and to keep their job. For them, the big question is not, what can I do to be a valuable employee? Instead, they ask, how much must I do to be an employee? They don't ask, how can I advance and get promoted? They only ask, how can I keep from getting fired? When people follow a leader because they have to, they will do only what they have to. People don't give their best to leaders they like least. They give reluctant compliance, not commitment. They may give their hands, but certainly not their heads or hearts. They are like the character in the cartoon by Randy Glassbergen. It shows 2 people standing side by side, one having copy, one looking at a paper, and they're having a conversation. Obviously, they're not working very much. One says to the other, I always give 110% to my job. 40% on Monday, 30% on Tuesday, 20% on Wednesday, 15% on Thursday, and 5% on Friday. I know a lot of places and a lot of people just like that, don't you? Just enough people have a hard time showing up. The only commitment they show is to taking off the maximum days allowed for any reason. Some spend a lot of mental energy finding creative ways of eliminating work. If only they use that commitment in positive ways. Number 3, the mentally absent. In a Level 1 environment, there are always individuals who may be physically present but mentally absent. They do not engage mentally and show up merely to collect a paycheck. This attitude is highly damaging to an organization because it seems to spread. When one person checks out mentally and doesn't receive any consequences for it, others often follow them. Mental turnover and sloppiness are contagious. Evidently, being mentally disengaged is also pretty common. The Gallup organization has tracked it for years and seen it bounce between 15 and 20% in the United States in recent years. In 2006, Gallup published a survey in the Gallup Management Journal showing stats through the second quarter of 2006. At that time, they found that among workers 18 or older in the United States, 15%, that's about 20.6 million people, were actively disengaged. Gallup estimated that it cost employers $328 billion. And in a more recent survey, Gallup found that more than half of all German employees were disengaged from their work. Clarence Francis, former chairman of General Foods, said, "You can buy a man's time, you can buy his physical presence at a given place, you can even buy a measured number of his skilled muscular motions per hour. But you cannot buy enthusiasm. You cannot buy loyalty. You cannot buy the devotion of hearts and minds and souls. You must earn these." People who rely on their position at level 1 rarely earn more than just enough from their people. And that means they cannot achieve any great level of success, because accomplishment requires more than that. Success demands more than most people are willing to offer, but not more than they are capable of giving. The thing that often makes the difference is good leadership. That is not found on level 1. When the people who work for a team, a department, or an organization give little of themselves, the results are mediocre at best, and morale is abysmal. Dick Vermeil, former Super Bowl winning coach, remarked, "If you don't invest very much, then defeat doesn't hurt very much, and winning is not very exciting." That is a pretty good description of a level 1 leadership environment. The greatest downside about level 1 leadership is that it is neither creative nor innovative. It's leadership that just gets by. And if a leader stays on the downside of level 1 long enough, he may find himself on the outside. If a leader fails on level 1, there's nowhere to go but U-Haul territory. He'll be moving out and looking for another job. Best behaviors on level 1. How to make the most of your position. If you have been leading on level 1 and relying on your position or title to keep things going, are you destined to stay there forever? Absolutely not. All leaders can learn to lead differently and move up the levels of leadership if they're willing to change the way they lead on level 1. How do you make the most of your leadership position while shifting from positional to permissional leadership? By doing 3 things. Number 1, stop relying on position to push people. There's nothing wrong with having a leadership position. That's the starting place for most leadership. However, there is everything wrong with having a positional mindset. To become an effective leader on level 1, you must stop relying on position to push people. The best leaders don't use their position at all to get things done. They use other skills. To help new leaders learn this lesson, Linda Sasser sometimes asks potential leaders to start leading before receiving a leadership position, just so she can see how they respond and to prepare them to move up the levels of leadership. She described it this way. When I have a person whom I feel is ready to lead, I assign them a challenge that involves sacrifice, courage, and humbleness. I need to make sure, before a title is given, that this person experiences what it is like to be a leader. The choice to lead needs to be theirs, and I need them to see that it's not always as glamorous as it appears. So I give them responsibility without the title, and I do not tell others that this person will be leading them. The new leader has to figure out how to improve the performance of his or her teammates without having a title or positional authority. At first, it is very difficult for them. They often come back to me with frustrations, asking, "How can I tell them what to do when they don't have to follow me?" This creates perfect teaching moments. It allows me to question their approach. I say, "Why are you telling them what to do?" A leader finds ways to influence action. Have you asked them how you can help them? Ask them about the challenges they have in their position. Maybe there's a way you can work together as a team and make things more efficient for one another. Form a relationship with this person and show interest in them. Over time, it is so exhilarating to see this process take place. What amazes me is what happens after I give these new leaders their title. Their teammates whom they were leading are usually thrilled when the person receives a leadership position, and their attitude of excitement is felt throughout the department. All this happens because the new leader has begun to learn that leadership isn't about the title or having an office. It's about influence and the fact that you can make an impact on others. It's easy to fall back on position to push people, though it isn't always effective. Christian Herter, formerly the governor of Massachusetts, learned that the hard way when he was running for the second term of office. One day, after a busy morning of campaigning without any time to stop for lunch, Herder arrived at a church barbecue. He was famished. As he moved down the serving line, he held out his plate to a woman serving the chicken. She put one piece on his plate and turned to the next person in line. "Excuse me, Governor," Herder said. "You mind if I have another piece of chicken?" "Sorry," said the woman. "I'm only supposed to give one piece of chicken to each person." "But I'm starved," the governor said. "Sorry, only one to a customer," said the woman. The governor was a modest man, but he was also hungry, so he decided to throw a little weight around. "Lady, do you know who I am? I am the governor of this state." "Do you know who I am?" the woman said. "I'm the lady in charge of the chicken. Now move along, mister." Nobody likes to be bossed around or to have someone else pull rank, and most people respond very poorly to positional leadership. How do you know if you possess a positional approach to leadership? Review the following concepts which represent a positional mindset. Level 1 leaders think top down. I'm over you. Separation. Don't let people get close to you. Image. Fake it till you make it. Strength. Never let them see you sweat. Selfishness. You're here to help me. Power. I determine your future. Intimidation. Do this or else. Rules. The manual says. In contrast, higher-level leaders think differently. The following captures how level 2 leaders think. Side by side. Let's work together. Initiation. I'll come to you. Inclusion. What do you think? Cooperation. Together we can win. Servanthood. I'm here to help you. Development. I want to add value to you. Encouragement. I believe you can do this. Innovation. Let's think outside the box. Level 2 relies on people skills, not power, to get things done. It treats the individuals being led as people, not mere subordinates. Whistler's Law says, you never know who's right, but you always know who is in charge. Well, I think Whistler must have known some level 1 leaders. The truth is that if you have to tell people that you're the leader, you're not. If you continue to rely on your position to move people, you may never develop influence with them, and your success will always be limited. If you want to become a better leader, let go of control and start fostering cooperation. Good leaders stop bossing people around and start encouraging them. That is the secret of being a people-oriented leader, because much of leadership is encouragement. Number 2, trade entitlement for movement. Political philosopher Niccolo Machiavelli wrote, "It's not the titles that honor men, but men that honor titles." He understood the nature of leadership and the true weakness of titles. If you want to make the most of your position at level 1 and to honor whatever titles you possess, then do not rely on them to lead others. Don't exercise your rights. Don't become possessive about your perks. And never believe that you deserve your position. Leadership isn't a right. It's a privilege. It must be continually earned. If you possess any sense of entitlement, that will work against you. If you followed the presidential primaries in 2008, you may have noticed 2 telling examples of how a sense of entitlement can impact leadership. On the Republican side, Rudy Giuliani was the early favorite in the polls, and many people believed he would receive the nomination of his party. He must have made a similar assumption because when primaries began, he decided not to enter the first few. Instead, he waited until the primary held in Florida. That state had a lot of delegates, and he thought he would win it easily, then use that momentum to carry him forward and take the nomination for president. What happened? John McCain, who political experts gave little chance of winning the nomination, worked hard from the beginning and picked up a couple of wins, and the momentum began to shift. By the time the Florida primary came into play, the country was moving toward John McCain and away from Rudy Giuliani. Giuliani's sense of entitlement probably lost him the nomination. On the Democratic side, Hillary Clinton was the early favorite in the polls, and many people believed she would receive the nomination of her party. Unlike Giuliani, she worked hard from the beginning. However, she seemed to assume that she would have the nomination sewn up by Super Tuesday, and didn't seem to have a strategy beyond that date. Meanwhile, Barack Obama waged his discipline campaign, gained incredible momentum, and received the nomination. The rest, as they say, is history. Good leaders don't take anything for granted. They keep working and keep leading. They understand that leadership must be earned and established. They remain dissatisfied in a way because dissatisfaction is a good one-word definition for motivation. Good leaders strive to keep the people and the organization moving forward toward its vision. They recognize that organizations can sometimes be filled with appointments, but teams can be built only by good leadership. You may have been appointed to a level 1 position, but you will have to lead yourself and others above it. You must be willing to give up what is in order to reach for what could be. Let a vision for making a difference lift you and your people above the confines of job descriptions and petty rules. Forget about your leadership rights. Focus on your responsibility to make a difference in the lives of the people you lead. When you receive a position or title, you haven't arrived. It's time to start moving and taking others along with you. Number 3, leave your position and move toward your people. People who rely on position often mistakenly believe that it is the responsibility of the people to come to them for what they need and want. Good leaders understand that it is their responsibility to move toward their people. Leaders are initiators. Greek philosopher Socrates said, "Let him that would move the world first move himself." If you want to move up to level 2 in your leadership, you need to get out of your territory. You need to stop being king of the hill, get down from your high place, and find your people. You must move beyond your job description, both in terms of the work you do and the way you interact with your people. You must make it your responsibility to learn who they are, find out what they need, and help them and the team win. In order to do anything new in life, we must be willing to leave our comfort zone. That involves taking risk, which can be frightening. However, each time we leave our comfort zone and conquer new territory, it not only expands our comfort zone, but also enlarges us. If you want to grow as a leader, be prepared to be uncomfortable. But know this, the risks are well worth the rewards. The laws of leadership at the position level. People frequently want to know how the many concepts in my various books go together. As I've taught the 5 levels of leadership over the years, the book they've asked me most about is the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. Which laws do you practice on level 1, people ask. The truth is that every law could be practiced on every level. However, it is also true that certain laws are best learned as a person grows and moves up the 5 levels of leadership. I've included an explanation of the laws of leadership that best apply to each level. They are certainly not necessary for one to learn the 5 levels, but they are provided for reference in the event that it can serve you in your growth process. The law of the lid. Leadership ability determines a person's level of effectiveness. Every person has a lid on his or her leadership potential. We are not all equally gifted. The challenge we all face is growing and developing to our full leadership potential, thereby raising the lid on our actual leadership ability. The single greatest hindrance to a leader's growth is becoming positional in thinking. Anytime you think you've arrived, whether your position is the lowest or the highest in the organization, you've lowered your expectations for yourself, sold your leadership short, and fallen into a no-growth mindset. People cannot reach their leadership potential by staying on level 1. If you are willing to forget about title and position, and instead focus on your potential, you will remove a great weight that would otherwise hold you down. If you want to break through your leadership lids and lift your leadership, you must move beyond level 1. The law of process. Leadership develops daily, not in a day. A leadership position can be received in a day, but leadership development is a lifelong process. Those who have a position mindset often say things like, "Today I became a leader." What they need to think is, "Today I received a leadership position. I will endeavor every day to become a better leader." That is embracing the law of process. Making that kind of statement emphasizes that the leadership appointment is often a starting point and staying there means you would never actually begin your leadership journey. The law of navigation. Anyone can steer the ship, but it takes a leader to chart the course. When you receive a leadership position, it's wise to recognize how early you are in the leadership journey and how much you still have to learn. The law of navigation is a good reminder of that. My friend Bill Hybels loves to sail and is quite an accomplished sailor. A few years ago, he and I and our wives enjoyed a few days of sailing in the British Virgin Islands along with 2 other couples. The boat we rented came with its own captain and crew, but we also got to participate in the sailing of the vessel. On the first day out, Bill had me at the wheel, and he gave me instructions as I attempted to sail the boat. It wasn't easy, but after a few hours I began to get the hang of it. Why do I mention this? Because as a novice sailor I was able to steer the boat, but I certainly could not chart the course. It took an experienced leader to do that. Bill could have done it, but in our case, the boat's captain did. If you are on level 1 as a leader, know your limitations. You can learn to chart the course, but to do that you must move up to higher levels of leadership. Beliefs that help a leader move up to level 2. To change from a level 1 leader to a level 2 leader, you must first change the way you think about leadership. No one has to remain a positional leader, though the longer you have relied on your position, the longer it may take you to change the way you lead and the way others see you. You will have to earn your way up from level 1. Here are 4 statements you must embrace internally before you will be able to change from a positional leader to a permissional one. Number 1, titles are not enough. We live in a culture that values titles. We admire and respect people with titles such as Doctor, CEO, Chairman, PhD, Academy Award winner, Director, Nobel Prize winner, Salesman of the Year, President, Post Laureate. But what do those titles actually mean? Very little. The titles are ultimately empty, and you must learn to see them that way. People who make it their career goals to gain certain titles are not setting themselves up to be the best leaders they can be. Who the person is and the work he does is what really matters. If the work is significant and adds value to people, then it doesn't need to come with a title. Many times we don't even have any control over whether we receive a title or an award. And for every person who has received recognition, there are thousands of others working without recognition who perhaps deserve even greater honor. Yet they continue to work without credit because the work itself and the positive impact on others are reward enough. Developing an awareness that titles have little real value and the position is the lowest level of leadership brings a healthy sense of dissatisfaction with level 1 as well as a desire to grow. A position is not a worthy destination for any person's life. Security does not give purpose. Leadership is meant to be active and dynamic. Its purpose is to create positive change. Number 2, people, not position, are a leader's most valuable asset. If you want to become a better leader, you can't focus on rules and procedures to get things done or keep things going. You must develop relationships. Why? Because the reality is that people get things done, not the playbook they use. And because people are the power behind any organization, they are its most valuable and appreciable asset. Learning this lesson made a huge difference in my leadership life. During the first few years of my career, I was a level 1 leader. I focused way too much on position and became position-driven. I was constantly wondering, what are my rights? Is my authority clear? Where am I on the organizational chart? How do I compare to other leaders? How can I climb the ladder? Who do I need to know? What's the next step in my career path? My preoccupation with position created frustration within me. If your focus is on position, you're never satisfied if you're not at the top. Ironically, if you're focused on position and you do get to the top, you won't be satisfied with that either. I'm sorry to say that back then I was willing to use people to improve my position instead of using my position to improve people. That wasn't right. And it didn't work. When I finally realized that relying on position and bossing over people wasn't the best way to get the best out of people, my attitude and actions started to change. I began to put people ahead of position. Instead of powering down, I started peopling up. Immediately, people noticed that my attitude had changed toward them. It took some time to develop the people skills I needed to become a better leader. But it took no time at all to let others know that I valued them, expressing appreciation for them, and taking interest in them personally. So that's a change you can make quickly too. And here's the immediate benefit. The moment people noticed the shift in my attitude, I noticed a positive shift in their response to me. They began to help me, which allowed me to help them. Number 3, a leader doesn't need to have all the answers. Positional leaders often believe that they need to have all the answers. After all, if they admit that they don't know something, it shows weakness. And if they show weakness, how are they going to stay on top of the hill and maintain their precious position? To get off of level 1, a leader has to think differently. When I started my career right out of college, I naively thought I had all the answers. Within a few months, I realized I didn't, but I was afraid to admit it. My insecurity and immaturity caused me to act like Mr. Answer Man. It didn't matter how far outside of my expertise the question was. For a few years, I tried the fake-it-till-you-make-it approach to leadership. However, I didn't fake it well, and others could tell. And of course, that kind of approach doesn't help you to actually make it. I began to realize that a leader's job is not to know everything, but to attract people who know things that he or she does not. Once I recognized that one of us is not as smart as all of us, I stopped bringing people together to give them the answers and started calling on them to help me find the answers. That transformed my leadership, not only because I could be myself and stop pretending that I knew more than I did, but also because it harnessed the power of shared thinking. Number 4, a good leader always includes others. Because positional leaders often work alone, standing atop the hill of leadership while their subordinates work together at the bottom, their teams work far under their capabilities. Why? Standalone leadership doesn't lead to teamwork, creativity, collaboration, or high achievement. What a shame, and what a waste of potential. My father's generation possessed a lot of lonely leaders whose motto was, "My way or the highway." As a result, they missed out on a lot. Moving up in the 5 levels of leadership is all about others. It means relating well to other people. It requires leaders to be examples for other people. It challenges them to develop and equip people. The higher you go up the levels of leadership, the more you realize that good leadership is about leading with others, not just leading others. It requires collaboration. It requires inclusion. It requires sacrifice of selfish personal ambition for the sake of the team and the vision of the organization. It means being a part of something greater than yourself. It means putting others ahead of yourself and being willing to go only as fast as the people you lead. A friend told me that when a group of Marines go into combat, they don't wear their insignia of rank. One reason is they don't want officers and non-commissioned officers to be targeted by the enemy. But there's also another reason. When Marines go into battle, they know who's in charge. The chain of command has already been clearly established. Nobody needs a reminder of it. But not wearing symbols of rank also sends a clear message from leaders to followers. We are all in this together. We live or die together regardless of rank. Moving up from level 1 to level 2 requires the greatest personal change from a leader. It requires a change of beliefs and attitudes toward other people and leadership. But here's the truth. Once you decide to include others in the leadership journey, you are well on your way to achieving success at the other levels. Guide to growing through level 1. As you reflect on the upsides, downsides, beliefs, and best behaviors of the position level of leadership, use the following guidelines to help you plan your growth. Number 1, thank the people who invited you into leadership. If you've ever been asked to take a leadership position, it's an indication that someone believed in you. Whether you were invited to lead a week or a decade ago, it's never too late to express gratitude to the person who invited you to the leadership table. Take the time to write a note or an email to thank that person and express the positive impact leading has had on your life. Number 2, dedicate yourself to leadership growth. You will not grow as a leader unless you commit to getting out of your comfort zone and trying to be a better leader than you are today. Write a declaration of commitment to growth that describes what you will do to grow and how you will approach it. Then sign and date it. Put it someplace where you can reference it in the future. This marks the day you committed to becoming the leader you have the potential to be and to working your way up the 5 levels of leadership. Number 3, define your leadership. Level 1 is the best place to spend time defining your leadership and deciding what shape you want it to take. Use the 3 questions contained in the Level 1 section of the audio book to describe the kind of leader you desire to be. Who am I? What are my values? What leadership practices do I want to put into place? Number 4, shift from position to potential. In the past, how have you expressed your career goals? Have you thought in terms of destinations, such as specific positions and titles, or have you thought in terms of the journey, meaning the work you will do while trying to achieve the greater vision? If you thought in terms of position, change your focus. Instead, think about your leadership potential. What kind of leader do you have the potential to become? What kind of positive effect can you have on the people that you lead? What kind of impact can you make on the world? Rewrite your goals to embrace a non-positional mindset. It'll make a difference in your teachability and the way that you treat your team members. Number 5, focus on the vision. One of the ways to reduce an emphasis on title or position is to focus more on the vision of the organization and to think of yourself more as someone who helps clear the way for your people to fulfill that vision. To help you do that, take some time to rewrite your job description in those terms. Write down the vision of the organization and how your team or department helps to contribute to that vision. Then write down specific ways you can make it easier for your team members to do their part to fulfill the vision. Number 6, shift from rules to relationships. If you have in the past relied on rules, regulations, and procedures to guide the people you lead, then you need to make a shift to a more relational approach to leadership. Begin by looking for value in every person you lead. Then go out of your way to communicate how much you value each person. People are the most appreciable asset of any organization. You must be certain to treat them that way. Number 7, initiate contact with your team members. If you've waited for people on your team to come to you for leadership, you need to change your approach to connecting with them. Get out of your office or cubicle and initiate contact with them. Make it your goal to get to know them. Express your appreciation to them. Encourage them and offer your support to them. Number 8, don't mention your title or your position. If you are in the habit of pulling rank or reminding people about your title or position, commit yourself to stop doing those things. I would even recommend going as far as not mentioning your title anytime you introduce yourself. Do whatever you have to do to identify less with your title and position and more with how you contribute to the team or the organization. Number 9, learn to say, I don't know. If you have led thinking that you have to have all the answers, then change your approach to leadership. Good leaders don't have to have all the answers, but do enlist and empower people who find the answers needed. Begin taking this approach immediately. For the next month, when someone asks for an answer that you don't know, admit it. Then ask for the opinions of the people on your team. If they don't have the answers to questions, ask them if they know people who do. Make problem-solving collaborative. Number 10, find a leadership coach. Most people find it very difficult to grow in leadership without the help of someone who's ahead of them in the journey. Think about the best leaders you know personally and ask one of them to coach or mentor you. Ask if you can meet with the person 4 to 12 times a year. Always prepare diligently before you meet by planning what questions you will ask and what problems you will ask for advice in solving. If you aren't prepared or don't have questions, don't ask for a meeting. Don't ever waste your mentor's time.